It's Thursday, February 3rd, 2022. My name is Ashton Ellett, Politics and Public Policy Archivist at the Richard B. Russell Library for Political Research and Studies at the University of Georgia. I'm here today in Washington, D.C. with Mr. Bobby Avary for a Russell Library oral history documentary interview. Mr. Avary is a Georgia native and a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Davidson University. Bobby was executive assistant and legislative assistant to Senator Herman Talmadge. He also served as chief of staff for U.S. Representative Charlie Hatcher of Georgia. A former partner at the firm of Wagner, Hines & Avary, he has worked most recently as a senior associate at Hurt Norton & Associates, a full-service government affairs, marketing, and lobbying firm here in Washington, D.C. Bobby, thank you very much for taking some time this afternoon.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Talk about your career in government, and especially your time with Senator Herman Talmadge. And also I'd like to thank Mr. Randy Knuckles and everybody here at Denton's for their hospitality and willingness to host us here in Washington, D.C. And I would like to wish my colleague Robert Lay, who's behind the camera, a very happy birthday.
That's right. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
So Bobby, I wonder if we could start by tell us a little bit about your childhood, your upbringing, where you grew up, and how you came to be the Bobby Avary that you are.
I grew up in West Point, Georgia, just south of LaGrange, Georgia, about 15 miles, right on Interstate 85. It's the current home of Kia Kia Motors. Kia is located on our old family farm.
Really? Okay.
And we were gently enticed by the state of Georgia to sell that property to the state so that they could build the Kia plant there. There's not a rock on that property because my brother and I and other people that worked on that farm picked up every one of them, enough to build a wall, entrance wall, all the way up to several lakes there on the property. I have wonderful childhood, fond memories of that. I'm not sure in the current environmental permitting landscape that project would be permitted today because there were Indian mounds adjacent to the Long Cane Creek, which would be rather interesting. I chose to go to public schools. My brother left the public school system in the 8th grade, but I stayed with it. I had an interesting and rather time in school. I was valedictorian of my class, co-president of the senior body. At that time, we were going through the integration of school process. Being right next to Interstate 85, some 85, 90 miles south of Atlanta, we were very close to, too close to Atlanta, and a lot of the, we had a fair amount of violence in our schools and in our town my senior year. On 4 different occasions, police walked the halls with weapons. It was an experience that I would never give second thoughts to for staying there, but at times my father thought about pulling me out of school, even though I was going to, by far, to be the valedictorian of the class. I went from there to, I played golf there, played football until I got hurt, and went from there to Davidson College in Davidson, North Carolina, and actually in a religion class related the experience that I just related to you with a professor that tried to get on his high horse about race in the Deep South, and I had to try to say, hey, look, you didn't live through it. This is why it really happened. That was in 1971, shortly after the riots in Charlotte, North Carolina. But I graduated from Davidson in 1975. That was really what I would call it was a terrible recession. Graduating into a terrible recession, had a number of interviews. I was, as you said, Phi Beta Kappa at Davidson, graduated cum laude. I always wanted to work in Washington, D.C. I went back and did a short training program at with a bank. But because I had worked on some campaigns, David Gambrell for the Senate, Burt Lance for governor, and then a couple state Senate races there in Georgia, I decided I wanted to go the political route. Dr. David Matthews, on the suggestion of Colonel Floyd Mann, who at one time was head of the Highway Patrol in the state of Alabama, family friend, suggested that I try to be an intern in the Ford White House.
Mm-hmm.
And I went there, went up to Washington, wet behind my ears as an intern. They do a full security check on you. They literally scared the living daylights out of my small hometown. More than anything, they wanted to make sure that I had not been a member of the SDS, the Students for Democratic Society. And of course, I was far from that. But enjoyed working there, learned a lot, but things became a little uncomfortable because of President Carter. Then Governor Carter at that time was starting to show up very well in the polls, and I went over and told Senator Talmadge about what my situation was, and he told me, he said, well, if you want to come to work for me, come on over. So,
Now, did you know Senator Talmadge before that?
we had my family knew Senator Talmadge.
Okay, tell me how they got to know each other.
We had come up a couple of times to Washington to, do the full tour,
Mm-hmm.
meet with Jack Brinkley, who was then the congressman in Georgia, have lunch in the senator's dining room with Senator Talmadge. That was back when I was in high school, my brother and me and my mother and father. And my family dates back to the Talmadge family, to my grandfather's day. Back when Senator Talmadge's father was running for governor. That was back in the old county unit system days.
Right.
And as far as Senator Talmadge was concerned, my grandfather delivered the state of Troup County, the county of Troup County, to his dad, Gene. And Talmadge was a very loyal person, and he just said, come on over and work for me. And I had all kinds of recommendations that I could give him, but he did not see the need for that. Rogers Wade was involved in the, well, I guess you would call the interview process and the discussions, and Rogers set me up, and I became a member of the office family.
What was Rogers AA or chief of staff at the time?
And they never called him chief of staff; they called him administrative assistant.
Right.
And Danny Tate was the legislative director, and Russell King was Danny's assistant, and Gordon Roberts was head of press. And they stuck me back there, basically doing odds and ends for the senator, including driving him. And so I got to know the senator pretty well on driving him around, in addition to doing various legislative or whatever Russell or Danny Tate had me do.
So you were kind of you sort of roved around
I was
to
kind of
different.
gopher at first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to avoid the gopher term,
Yeah,
which kick
yeah.
in.
I ended up, as I'll describe it, I had intended to go to Davidson, and not to go to work there for 2 years, and then go to business school. My father said if I could get in Wharton Business School that he would pay for it, and I said, deal done. Thing was, by then, Senator Talmadge had given me far too much responsibility at a young age. I was responsible for overseeing about 20-something employees in the office at probably 24, 25 years old. I was head of all of his casework, special projects, in addition to doing legislative work, all of the, well, I should say most of it, for Veterans Affairs. And I had done some finance work, but mostly that was done by Russell and Randy.
So you mentioned casework, and the senator was very famous for his constituent service.
That's right. That's what I was head of.
Tell me about that process and what that meant to the senator and what that entailed.
as far as he was concerned, that was the most important thing that he came to Washington to, was to serve the people of Georgia, to make sure that they got their veterans' pensions, to make sure they got the Social Security checks. If they had any problems, to call him. If they were having any problems getting any farmers' home loans, if there was any disaster, he was right on top of it, directed us to be, Johnny on the spot, providing all kinds of ideas and extension of help, working with whomever the administration was to get help for the people of the state of Georgia, and also any type of special projects for Georgia that would generate jobs and economic activity.
Now, some other folks have said that if you called the senator's office, there's a good chance that you would actually speak to the senator. You might not speak to him very long, but you could actually get the senator on the phone. Is that true?
He picked up his phone, particularly in the afternoons, right after lunch. Not much in the morning, because that was when he had his meeting,
Sure.
had various appointments and then committee hearings and so forth. But after lunch, once he'd come back from having his lunch over in the Senate dining room, he would always, every now and then, he'd pick up the phone.
Yeah.
And the thing was, is he expected us to be there too, not at lunch. So
Sure.
and we had to be there every morning. I mean, we were at the office every morning at 7:15, 7:30, because we started appointments no later than 7:45 every morning.
Well, Senator Talmadge was very famously an early riser. Did you ever have to go on the 3 a.m., 4 a.m. jogs?
No, no. But I have seen cabinet secretaries come in there with wet heads, and he'll look at them and he say, "You just get out of the shower?"
He didn't think too highly if you rolled out of bed or 8, 9 o'clock.
Now that was members of the cabinet.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, I can vividly remember him saying that on a number of occasions, particularly to some of President Carter's cabinet members.
Oh, well, that's a good transition into my next question, which was, how would you describe Senator Talmadge as a boss and the sort of atmosphere in the office?
He was believed in a very organized office. He believed in delegation. He trusted everybody to give him the best input on issues, pros and cons. He expected us to be objective and let him make decisions. He wanted to know who had weighed in on the issue, by phone, by mail. He wanted to know what groups were involved on an issue. He entrusted a lot to what is now called the chief of staff, but the administrative assistant, his legislative assistant. I'm not as familiar with his interaction with the press operation, other than helping them write a few press releases, and then they'd change everything we'd write anyway. So.
And that was Gordon Roberts.
That was Gordon.
His sort of
and so
purview.
But he was a good boss. I mean, he was a very nice person. After I've been there for about a year and a half, back then they had no squawk boxes, what I call squawk boxes, into the offices. We heard nothing on the Senate floor. There was no television on the Senate floor. So we had has Russell talked to you all about the rat gallery?
That doesn't ring a bell.
All right, there was.
I feel like that would ring a bell if I remember.
If you're facing the where the President of the Senate sits, right to your right, right above there is the press gallery, and to the right of that is an area that was then called the rat gallery, and that's where I would sit all day long and listen to what the debate is. And when there came a vote, I would meet Senator Talmadge down at the elevator, tell him what the vote was. And generally, we were prepared for whatever the amendments were. But if there's any hiccup or anything that had come up, then I would let him know. But to be honest with you, that's how I learned a lot about rules and procedures of the Senate. I mean, I sat there all day, made an awful lot of good friends. Some of them went on to be, very distinguished here in this town, But it was a good part. We also had a very good softball team that created a lot of camaraderie within the office. Senator never came to a game. Didn't expect him to. He was into his routine, go home, go to the colonnade, go, do whatever he was going to do and get to bed so he can get up at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning and do his jog in his overalls. But I would drive him to the airport a lot. At that time, I was driving a Volvo, and he remarked to me, he said, "Bobby, what part of Atlanta was this car made?" And I had to tell him that it was not made there. Soon thereafter, I traded that car. I called up a Volvo friend of mine here in Washington, and I said, "Ev, I got a big favor. I need to turn this in and get an Oldsmobile." And so that's what I did. I traded and got an Oldsmobile 98. And as far as he was concerned, I traced it back to outside of Atlanta to one of the manufacturers.
This car's from Doraville.
He was very, very cognizant and proud of the fact that Georgia was a major manufacturer of automobiles. Mm-hmm. That weighed heavily on his decision to vote for the Chrysler bailout.
Yeah, tell me, were you on staff when
I was on staff?
Tell me about that.
Helped staff him on the issue. Of course, we got input from the manufacturers, and then I had the pleasure of sitting in on a meeting with Lee Iacocca. Mm-hmm. He was a very imposing man. And Talmadge just sat there, and Rogers was in there, and Russell and Randy, and Mr. Iacocca made his plea, and Senator Talmadge told him, he said, "Well, I don't really like voting for this, but I don't have a choice." So because auto manufacturing is very important to the state. Right. But so that's how that all came around. I was involved in staffing him on a number of rather touchy subjects.
Such as? I mean, we talked about the Chrysler bailout, but
Panama Canal was another one.
Tell me about that, because there was speaking of touchy subjects,
and I'll go back on the other. Mm-hmm. Sometimes Senator Nunn was a bit uncomfortable. He did not want to part with Senator Talmadge on.
Right.
At that juncture in time, Senator Nunn was considered much more conservative than Senator Talmadge. Much more.
Which is interesting looking back. That probably wouldn't meet the perception of today.
If people just operated without studying the issue, mm-hmm. you would think that. But Nunn generally didn't want to stray away from Senator Talmadge, how he voted. I mean, Talmadge, I think, was third or fourth most senior member of the Senate, mm-hmm. and he was very much believed in voting for. Most of the time, he voted for local interests, but on other issues, he would vote national when push came to shove.
How much of it on the Panama Canal issue was the fact that he was getting pressure from the Carter White House, who I assume at this time
we told them
Dan Tate was
Danny was there, and Danny was very involved. We did a lot of briefings. We got a heck of a lot of mail. Talmadge had a requirement that we turn around mail. I don't know if you guys know mm-hmm. this, within 3 days. And we didn't have computers. We were actually the first office in the Senate to get a computer operation. But we had those electric typewriters, and we sent all that stuff through, and generally made it. But Russell, Randy, and I, and Dan Tate, we'd probably dictate, I don't know, some days 40 or 50 responses a day, in addition to whatever we were doing.
Right.
And, working very hard at very low pay, really, to speak of. The deciding factor for the senator was, and we told the White House, told Danny knew the senator so well, is to be cautious, don't try to roll him.
Right.
And they brought in Admiral Holloway.
Okay.
And Admiral Holloway dove into the issue that the canal could be blown up within 5 minutes. And there was a national issue that the senator said, we can't have that. It would stop commerce in this country. And he took a lot of heat. It probably weighed in on his election.
Sure.
He was pressed an awful lot by people like Jesse Helms, who was a very close friend of his. Helms, he and Helms were extremely tight, but at the same time, he and Hubert Humphrey and George McGovern were all friends. I mean, things worked a lot different back then. Of course, they were on the agriculture committee together.
Right.
But Helms pushed him pretty hard. But to my knowledge, the White House never really tried to bulldoze the senator. They were mostly reaching out to him for advice. I did witness Randy and I and Rogers and Russell witnessed the senator get rather ornery with Senator Muskie. He became Secretary of State.
Right.
And right out of the gate, like a new administration wants to kick up their heels and do a few things, President Carter did the wheat deal with Russia. And Talmadge had some very choice words for Secretary Muskie about that. I think they knew from then on out if they're going to deal in the agricultural area, and he told Bob Bergman this, who was Secretary of Agriculture, I think we best touch base. Tom Foley at that time was chairman of the House Agriculture Committee. He went on to be Speaker.
Right.
And he and Foley was extremely close. Foley was really down the middle center Democrat from Washington, but they shared the same view, and from then on. But we had a parade of the Carter folks. I mean, Stu Eisenstadt and all the cabinet members. I mean, they used to come in there pretty religiously. Initially.
Now, I thought because of Danny's role on Carter's staff that he would have been the primary point person for contact within the Senate.
Danny was head of the Senate liaison.
So he would be
Jim Free was head of the House.
Okay.
From Tennessee, who had worked for Ned McWhorter, who was governor of Tennessee, who I know pretty well. Jimmy Free and Danny was head of the, and of course Frank Moore was in charge of the whole thing.
Right.
And see, Frank had spent months on Rogers Wade's couch.
Is there a story there?
No, he didn't have to play. The Carter campaign ran a very, very frugal.
That's true.
Frugal campaign.
That is true.
I mean, extremely frugal.
So they did a lot. Even top staff couch surfed.
Well, yeah.
So you mentioned Hubert Humphrey, George McGovern, Jesse Helms. The one name that comes up most often, I think, when it comes to friendships, or maybe two names, will be Russell Long and Bob Dole.
And John Stennis.
Well, what did you witness in terms of their relationships and how that developed and evolved?
Just collegial as much as anything, particularly Dole and Talmadge on Senate Agriculture Committee. Talmadge and Thurman were dated way back. They even called each other cousins for some reason. I think there is some linkage there. Helms was next to Dole, was probably senior ranking to after Dole on Senate Ag. Of course, McGovern and Humphrey were on the Agriculture Committee, and they were very much interested, as we had talked earlier, about the issues of child nutrition,
right,
and hunger programs, and it was close to Senator Talmadge's heart, but at the same time, he knew that working with them on that issue, he'd get their vote on some other stuff, particularly like peanut subsidies,
sure, cotton,
milk, issues that were directly related to the state of Georgia and their interest.
Was Georgia, I mean, this probably would have been a great question for the late Mike McLeod. But was Georgia a major chicken producing state at that time?
Absolutely, yeah.
So-
George Watts was head of the
Oh, yeah.
Poultry Council.
Who had been a Georgia native?
Yeah, he
been
had worked for a Georgia congressman.
one of the congressmen, or maybe
Right.
two.
Yeah.
So you came on.
Georgia had a lot of agricultural interest. Let's think through them. They had cotton, they had chickens, they had some tobacco, they had peanuts, forestry,
Oh yeah, timber.
timber,
Paper timber.
I'm probably cattle,
And peaches, I assume.
peaches. Now it's a big blueberry, the largest blueberry state in the United States, believe it or not. So
Yeah, I know there was a cold snap south of the Nat line that had a lot of blueberry and pecan
Right.
farmers concerned. So switching gears a bit, you came on staff in 75, 76-ish and
Right.
stayed on through 80, 81. That was a really tough time. We talked about votes and stuff, but tough time personally and professionally for the senator in terms of the death of his son.
that
Bobby,
happened before I came to Bobby.
and his fight with alcoholism that became a very public fight with alcoholism that turned into a very public acrimonious split from his wife, Betty Talmadge. What did you see? Did that take a toll on the senator or affect
I
him?
admire him for tackling the issues. Some of his Senate friends intervened with him. One or two of them had issues themselves in
Sure.
the past. But Senator Stennis, Long, Dole, I think. I don't know if he was ever approached by Senator Kennedy. I'm not sure. But I do know those members encouraged him to get help, and he went out to what began the Betty Ford facility, the naval facility out in San Diego.
Right, the Long Beach.
Right.
Yeah.
But I admire him for tackling that. He came back with a fresh, clear mind, and that's about it, really.
When did you first find out about the ethics charges and that might develop into a major problem?
When Ed Pound was coming to the office all the time and following me home.
Tell for those who don't know, tell us who Ed Pound.
Ed Pound was a Washington Star reporter who was working the Talmadge ethics case. I got along, we called him Fast Eddie. I got along with Ed fine, but I lived on Capitol Hill, and on a number of occasions, Ed would follow me. I walked to work, and he would try to get information out of me, and I didn't have anything to give him.
Right. Now, were you roped into the grand jury investigation?
No,
or
I knew nothing about the grand jury. I did look at a lot of the documents that Randy was working on and talk with Bobby Troutman an awful lot and look, make sure Bobby got his whatever he needed at night to make him, comfortable for the evening. He was tucked in, and he was helping the senator with his defense.
Right.
But other than that, no, I never got really involved in it.
So you didn't have to go before the ethics
I went
committee
before
and stuff?
nobody. Like
Wow.
that. No.
I think you're the first staffer I've talked to yet who was like, didn't have to sit there with Jim Hamilton and get grilled by the committee.
Well, Jim Hamilton wanted to know what I'd been doing.
Oh,
and,
sure.
Wanted my daily work routine and who I was interacting with and this, that, and the other. And, Pound would follow me and try to ask the same questions. And I'd tell him, Eddie, I'm just doing, what work the senators got me doing.
Right.
And it was a full plate. I mean, I had to be there at 7:15 every morning, and then we would work all hours into the night.
Right. What did you think about when the Senate, when the committee finished up its work and the Senate denounced?
I thought it was a
Senator
railroad
Talmadge?
job.
What do you mean by that?
I'm sure a lot of them were just as guilty as hell of some of the same thing. And if you compare it today with some of the allegations of certain things that are going on, that was peanuts. I'm not saying that it's right, but I mean, if you compare that to some of the stuff that's alleged about Hunter Biden, I mean, that's minuscule. I mean, Hunter's deal, we're talking millions of dollars, but you know, there are members who've had issues, but that whole thing developed. I never had any run-ins really with Talmadge's wife Betty. I helped her out on some things, but she was a tough nut.
Yes, a strong personality.
Very strong personality. She had her agenda too.
Sure. Now she ran for Congress.
I think she tried.
For sure.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I do remember that Betty Talmadge was hosting a bunch of members, high-ranking members of Congress right after Carter got the nomination, and none of them knew him, and Talmadge hosted it, and Rogers got a call and said, we got 100 people coming here for lunch, and Miss Betty's gone. So that was the reason they had fried chicken and collard greens and mashed potatoes and cornbread. They whipped it all up.
They were lucky to have
down
that.
there at Lovejoy. They were lucky. But yeah.
So, did you stayed in Washington during the 1980 campaign? You were still working the Senate office, or were you loaned out to
I had
campaign?
opportunities, or at least people kind of act like they wanted to hire me before that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a loyal person. I wanted to stay with the senator, thick and thin. He's been good to me, and I wasn't going to leave him.
Right.
And I didn't think I thought he'd always been good to me. I wasn't going to leave his shop.
When did you get a sense that the senator might be in for a run, either in the Democratic primary or the general?
Well, as I told you, we were Russell and I helped dream up the name Zigzag Zell. We always thought the primary would be the toughest thing, and that Zell was going to come off just as he did from the left. And then Zell ended up being more to the right of Senator Talmadge after he became a senator. But and I like Zell. I mean, I worked with him on some stuff. I like it. But Senator, I don't know. I'd have to go back and think a lot about
Sure.
that campaign. We were just running the office. I mean,
Right.
Talmadge, we were not involved in the campaign. We helped outside the door with trying to raise some money. You know, Talmadge had the largest fundraiser ever to be had, ever, so $1,000 a head. That was unheard of.
Right. That's peanuts by the day.
Yeah,
standard.
yeah, exactly. So, but I wasn't directly involved in that campaign.
When did you find out that the senator had actually lost to Mattingly?
Standing with Randy and Russell and Rogers, and we were all down there, at the headquarters. And then the next morning we went out to the senator's, not at Lovejoy, but where he was living there in Henry County.
Oh, the Hampton House.
Yeah, Hampton House. And I can to this day remember standing out there in the backyard with Randy and Rogers telling us we done lost this thing. Mm-hmm. And that was just like a big hole in the stomach.
Apart from knowing that somebody that you held in very high regard had been defeated, what did that mean for you professionally, that your boss had just been
scared as hell? Didn't know what I was going to do.
So now obviously you landed on your feet, but what was that process like to go for? Okay, so this is the first week of November.
Well, I immediately tried to find a job. I wanted to stay in Washington, and we had a couple of new members of Congress come to town. One of them was Charles Hatcher, mm-hmm. and he needed a chief of staff. Mattingly's folks tried to put out the signals to me that they would like for me to go to work with them. I chose not to. So I interviewed with Congressman Hatcher and ended up coming on staff with him. Got a lot of people urging Congressman Hatcher to hire me. That he had a huge campaign debt. He needed somebody that could come in there and bridge the way with folks, donors that could help him get rid of that debt, set up a staff, get him started, and I stayed there about 8 months and then moved on.
So he succeeded Dawson. That was Dawson Mathis's seat race. So that would have been your home. Your
No, my home was 3rd District.
I guess that would have been up more.
Mine was Jack Brinkley was representing.
That's
that,
right.
And
This sort of
then,
Columbus
now
based.
Sanford Bishop represents it.
That's right. That's right.
And now Drew Ferguson represents it. Sanford's got the lower part.
Right.
But Drew, who's from my hometown, West Point, his father delivered me as a baby, and yeah, I've known Drew forever. My brother's real close to him.
So looking back on your, 5-6 years with the senator, but also your family's connection to the Talmadges, what do you think Herman Talmadge's strengths and weaknesses as a politician were?
His weakness was his whether or not it was genetic or whatever was alcohol. He could not take a drink more than a couple. He's one of those people that was prone to it would just negatively affect him. He had more strengths than weaknesses. I mean, he had that flaw there. I never knew anything much about his marriage to Betty. They kind of had their own agendas. She was very close with the Liz Carpenter and that whole crew. But she was selling beef to the Shah of Iran and all this kind of stuff, and got burned on that, I think. And I don't know. She never asked me to do anything in that office, and I can't say anything good or bad about her.
Sure. Sure.
My aunt knew her pretty well. My uncle, Arch Avary, was close to Senator Talmadge, and especially he and Bill Bowden, who ended up chairing Senator Talmadge's campaign. He and my uncle were the best friends.
Okay.
And my uncle was also very close to Carl Sanders there in the state of Georgia. You can look his name up, Arch Avary. Talmadge would appear with my uncle on occasion. My uncle was a colon cancer survivor, and one of the first people to ever get operated on successfully. And anyway, the Trust Company of Georgia, Coca-Cola, they sponsored him all over the Southeast, particularly Georgia, and trying to get people to take a colon exam.
Right.
And
which is now very routine, but
exactly.
it seems like
Back then it was different. But
right.
Anyway, he and Senator Talmadge would talk about that on occasion. We had Senator Talmadge down for a couple bird hunts on our farm down there in Georgia. And
now, were you a quail farm or a pheasant farm?
it was dove.
Or dove, yeah.
It was dove. But he would always enjoy that, just getting out when he was down there. And my uncle would join us for that. And, but he, like I said, he was extremely bright, very smart, had a keen mind. I think that was revealed at the Watergate hearings. He did not believe in BS. As I told you at lunch, the first paper I ever wrote for him, I was so daggone proud of it. It's 3 pages. It came back with X's. Worst, probably would have gotten
Probably the worst grade you ever got.
He would have gotten an A at Davidson Easy. And he told me, if you can't see it on 1 page, don't say it at all. And from then on, we had a good understanding. I think he had a lot of respect in the Senate for his intellect. What he did behind closed doors as far as cutting deals, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know. He put a lot of trust into me as as I said, at a very young age. I had good direction from Rogers and Danny until he left, Russell and Randy, and but it was a good experience for me. I think he genuinely wanted to help everybody in the state of Georgia. I never heard him say anything racist in my life. I never heard him use an N-word or anything like that. Never.
Mm-hmm.
Never.
It's one of those things that's really interesting is the perception of the senator now versus the time in which he's operating. How do you think Talmadge has been remembered, and why do you think he has not been the focus of more sort of scholarly interests in the way that a Richard Russell or a George Wallace type has been?
Well, first of all, he was the furthest thing away from George Wallace that you could ever be. He knew Lester Maddox pretty well, but I don't think he condoned a lot of the things that, the axe handle and all that stuff that Lester did. But at the same time, he admired Lester Maddox for putting a lot of emphasis on education. I think Talmadge, I might be wrong about this, but I think when he was governor, he was the first one to give out free school books for children in the state. Education was a big thing for the senator, and I think he thought it was necessary across the board. He was very helpful to the colleges and universities in Georgia, including the black, historically black colleges and universities. He very much believed that in creating jobs for the state, that was the best thing for helping everybody. I think those were his and I think he had the respect of his colleagues in the Senate, and in the only administration I ever witnessed him working with was President Carter, and I think they had to deal with him appropriately.
They'd been forewarned about how to deal with him.
He was never a mean man. He never was vindictive or anything. He was always, I thought, very generous. He was not wishy-washy about his beliefs. You knew where he was coming from.
Well, you mentioned that it sounds like he could be both unassuming and pretty. I'm trying to think of the right word for this. He was no nonsense. In different from the, say, what's the term? The hail fellow well met, the backslapping politician. It doesn't sound like he was one of those loud, boisterous, backslapping politicians that somebody like somebody.
He had a distinguishable voice. Fritz Hollings from South Carolina had a very distinguished voice. They were very close.
Right.
We were next door neighbors on Russell, on the first floor of Russell. Hollings was right there next to us. We came very close to his office. Senator Kennedy inherited Senator Talmadge's office.
Okay.
Yeah, Senator Ted Kennedy, and
which is now Mitch McConnell's office, I believe. His personal office, not leadership.
Yeah. But I would see him slap a person, a colleague on the back, and always speak in a gentlemanly sort of way. He wasn't a person of a lot of small talk.
Right.
I never really, other than what the University of Georgia was doing, or I never really engaged with him about sports or anything.
Sure.
He loved to hunt, loved to fish, and loved to run. When he had a dog, he liked his dogs.
Right. Did you stay close with the senator after he retired and returned to Georgia?
I'd call him on a pretty regular basis. We'd chat. I think he was lonely.
Yeah.
But I'd talk to him off and on. I enjoyed it. He's a wealth of information.
Yeah. Well,
and he was a prolific reader. God, I forgot that. This man would read book after book after book.
And just absorb all that
Yeah,
information?
different, mostly, historical, biographical type books. What I mostly would see him reading.
Like everybody's dad and grandpa likes a good biography,
Yeah,
good history
yeah.
book. So, thinking about Senator Talmadge and how the Senate operated back when he was there and you were there, what do you think, and this is obviously your opinion, your analysis, but what do you think Senator Talmadge would think about the United States Senate and how it operates here in
He would
2022?
He'd call them a bunch of fools, and he used the word fool an awful lot, and he said this is just totally out of control, not good for the country.
So, in terms of, we talked earlier at lunch, and the term, conference committees and markup and everything, or what would be known in political science terms as regular order. Why do you think regular order has broken down within the last 5 to 10 years, whereas it was such a critical part of your work and Senator Talmadge's work, whether it be on the Ag Committee, the Finance Committee, those conference committees with House Ways and Means?
That's a good question.
Well, why didn't the Senate operate? I'm a historian. I don't know. Why doesn't the Senate operate?
But you've
like
got
that?
your ideas. I have to say a lot of it's the internet, 24/7. Members are covered 24/7. Anything comes out of their mouth, at the same time, they're looking for avenues to, say something constructive or destructive.
Mm-hmm.
Both parties. And there's probably too much money now in politics, far too much. Too many members are spending way too much time raising money for their campaigns, and that's not good. It's getting them away from what's necessary. There's not the socializing, by and large,
Right.
of the members like it was. Some of the socializing in the congressional office, leader's office, got Talmadge into trouble, but with his drinking.
Right.
But it was a common fact that there were bars in both the Senate, Democrat and Republican majority leader offices. They had nothing but a bar. And it was an afternoon, it was a regular occasion. It's just, on a staff level, there's even less socializing now, I think. Some of people are very vicious about people's political views. Back in the days I played poker, I used to play poker in Senator Baker's office 3 days a week.
This is Howard Baker.
Howard Baker, as a lobbyist. I mean, I had good friends there. We'd sit around, and people from Democrat and Republican staffers, we'd sit down, we'd play poker 3 or 4 times, at least 3 times a week for a long time. And that was when Baker was majority and minority leader. I don't think that type of stuff goes on anymore.
This is totally off base, but what kind of poker was it? 5 card, 7 card?
5 cards.
5 card. Yeah. The hard hitting questions everybody comes here for.
But it was fun,
Yeah.
We as a lobbyist, I'm gonna be honest with you, I made most money back then, proportionally, than I have ever made. I mean, because people would hire me just to, make sure that things were going well with them and the majority leader, his staff.
Right.
And they were very happy. I mean, I was just good friends with them, and some of my better friends worked for them. But at the same time, I was very good friends with some of the Kennedy staffers.
Mm-hmm.
I used to make sure that they got free Coca-Colas and peanuts all the time, and they loved me for it. I can still see myself walking down the hall making that delivery on a pretty regular basis.
Did you have to call Earl Leonard and get everything?
No,
checked
Earl
up?
made sure we had plenty of it there in the Peanut Council. So, but I did tell him at one time, I told Earl, that that I was making sure that Senator Kennedy staff was supplied, and I think he liked Senator Kennedy liked the Frescas.
Oh,
That was his favorite drink.
that was LBJ's favorite drink.
Was it really? I didn't know that.
I believe so. I say that with 75% confidence.
That's a good drink. I like it myself.
We use
Refreshing.
Yeah, I always remember the first time I had Fresca because my grandmother and grandfather always kept squirt in the fridge. So I was like, "What's Fresca?" And I was like, "Oh, there you go."
Yeah.
So, but no, Southern Illinois is not exactly known as Coca-Cola country, a large PepsiCo area of the country. Again, neither here nor there.
You know, going back to the campaign, it was rather interesting. You know, Talmadge had never really had to campaign hard.
Right.
I mean, you know, we brought in the film crew to do his, do the TV commercials, and the guy that we hired, he was an ornery type person, but he was good. He had a good
He was out of
track
South
record.
Carolina, wasn't he?
I think so.
Yeah.
And I can't think of his name. He had gray curly hair.
Yeah.
And when he approached the senator, he said, "Senator, you can be an asshole, but so can I.
Well.
So we're gonna do this together, and you just do what I say, and we'll get it done quick. He said, "Sooner the better." But anyway, I had to bring in like 4 or 5 different ties and let them use my ties versus what the senator was wearing and all
You
that.
couldn't do
Dressed
them all
him
in a
up
red
little
tie.
bit, but that was the only time that while I was there that there was a campaign involved.
Right. Well, you mentioned fundraising, and earlier you'd mentioned the $1,000 a hit. I assume that was probably the only fundraiser that the senator would have is that birthday party. And
That wasn't his birthday party.
Oh, it wasn't. Okay.
No, that was the first. That was a Washington fundraiser, and at
Okay.
that time it was the largest Washington fundraiser dollar-wise in Washington, and it was very well attended,
And that was for
including Alan Cranston came
Alan from California,
in California. At that time, he was majority whip.
and he wanted to stay majority whip, so he came.
That's right.
He came.
And Talmadge would always say the defining factor of when you're a Democrat and a Republican is the day you vote for the leadership. The rest of the time, you just see how things go.
I will say that is definitely a change from then to now. But tell me about, you've already mentioned a little bit about lobbying and stuff, but tell me about the nature of your work after you left Capitol Hill as a staffer.
After I left Senator Talmadge, then I went with Hatcher, and then I went to work with, have y'all heard of Richard Ray?
Yeah.
Richard Ray was administrative assistant to Senator Sam Nunn. Was with him from the beginning. They're both from Perry, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard and I were good friends. And Richard had left the senator and started his own consulting business. And he told me that he had enough work that he needed some help, so he asked me to join him. And they were in the offices of a firm by the name of Wagner and Baruti.
Bill Baruti? Or
Bill Baruti's brother, Joe.
Okay.
And I did see a lot of Bill, though.
Sure.
But anyway, Richard was officing there, and Wagner and Baruti was one of Richard's clients. Wagner and Baruti were very tight with Lynn Nalsinger and the Reagan Bush group. And I think I'd been working with Richard for about a month, maybe. And then Richard walks in the office. Richard's tight as he could be. And we had an office about not even half the size of this room with 2 desks. And Richard came in there one day and looked at me and he said, "Bobby, Jack Brinkley had just announced his intention to leave the Congress, retire." He said, "Bobby, I'm going to run for Congress. I want you to run my campaign, and I want you to keep this business going in case I get beat." So
Plan B.
That's right. Plan B. He was always a planner. So I said, okay, Richard, let's get started. He said, well, you write me out a plan tonight for the campaign, and we'll discuss it tomorrow. And then I got to be careful about taking a salary here. I can't take a salary. So you just figure out escrowed, whatever, if I get beat, then I get taken care of. I said, okay, Richard, that's fine. We'll work it out. Anyway, long and short of it is I ended up running Richard's campaign. It was the largest percentage win in the United States.
Oh, wow.
Democratic win in the United States. I think we won with 85% in a contested race. Richard, as I said, was very tight. I wrote the content, and we hired somebody who did hamburger commercials in Columbus. Did not want to spend any money. He did TV and radio. Did not want to spend any money on a pollster. So I got phone books from around the state and played around with that and developed a poll that gave us at least a sense of where we were and how we were doing. Did numerous fundraisers, and Richard won. And I would say to this day, he's one of the hardest working members of Congress I have ever seen in my life. Just hard worker. Long and short of it is I continued the business and stayed with Wagner and Baruti. Mm-hmm. They asked me to roll my business into theirs. They had they were a communications operation primarily, but were getting a lot of lobbying work because of their connection with President Reagan and Vice President Bush.
Right.
So they needed somebody. They'd never lobbied in their life. So I ended up running that operation and eventually bought into that firm. Mm-hmm. We kept that business going in different locations for quite a number of years. As I said to you earlier, very successful early on then as people got a little bit older. But some wonderful days and memories there. And then for a brief time after that, I worked for a private equity firm in renewable energy and energy efficiency, development and finance. We got killed in the crash of 2008, and then I went to work with Bob in 2010, Bob Hurt. And Bob's been was extremely good to me, and we severed that. Bob dissolved that firm in December 31, and already had a LLC that I had not been using, but I had to bring it up to date with fees and taxes and so forth, named TA Business Development, and I launched that January 1 of this year.
Well, when I ask a question, I think everybody's asking, whatever happened to Mr. Ray's escrow? Did you, who? Richard Ray, he told you put his money in escrow.
Well,
whatever happened to his escrow?
Escrow, I took care of that.
Yeah. Well,
that's a good question.
No. Well, Bobby, I appreciate it. Is there anything else that you'd like to record for posterity, or for last thoughts on Senator Talmadge?
No, I would just say that Senator Talmadge there's probably a lot of misinformation out there about a very good man who cared about his state and cared about his country. He would always resort back to his days in the Navy as a naval officer. Mm-hmm. Very dedicated to the United States, and like I've said, I never saw him say a racist word in his life. Just a good person.
Well, sir, thank you very
Thank
much. You. And on behalf of the Richard B. Russell Library, thank you for participating in this.
It's been a pleasure.
We really do appreciate it.